Morning, guys. Here it is, the 10th of September already. in Minnesota here, bow hunting starts very soon, a few days. So, boy, we're into the hunting season now for whitetails and thinking about it. And brings to mind all kinds of things. I mean, you know, I just got done writing 2 magazine articles for Midwest Outdoors, and gee, they're good articles. You know, I've been doing this for 40 years, and sometimes I surprise myself whenever I write another new article about something, about subjects I've never ever written before. And I get started on them, and I keep thinking of different things that are related, and deer we've taken doing these things, and gee, it's fun being an outdoor writer who writes about deer hunting. And I do it all year round. Well, anyway, before I get started, we're going to talk today about the primary subject is about a big 10-pointer taken by my youngest daughter, and there's so many deer I could be talking about, but this is kind of special because using a hunting method that we call the gentle nudge. And as years go by, we've refined these methods, we honed them, made them better, more perfect, and in my 10th edition, this is our best versions of these 6 hunting methods I talk about all the time, these fair chase stand hunting methods. Tree stand hunting and ground level stand hunting. And they're really good, what we call mature buck effective. The methods we've been using for 30 years now to take just about my 3 sons and I to take 4 mature bucks every year. And it's a remarkable thing. We've taken 105 of them now since 1990. And you don't know of many hunters who've done that. And this is on public land, inhabited by overabundant gray wolves. A lot of competition there. And it makes our deer especially difficult to hunt. But these 6 hunting methods I talk about all the time are that good that we can just keep taking our usual 4, sometimes 5, every year. And I wish you could learn some of these. If you just learned one this year and worked with it, refined it, used it out there, and did it carefully just the way it should be done, you're going to really like that hunting method. And so if you don't have my book yet, you should get it soon and use one of those methods, or a couple of them, this year, and learn how good they are for taking older bucks. The last time something came on the market, sporting goods stores or whatever, that really revolutionized deer hunting, buck hunting especially, things that really work for taking big bucks, was back in the mid-1980s when portable tree stands and doe and extra type lure scents were introduced. And during the decade that followed, man, were those 2 things great for taking older bucks, big bucks. And, my boys and I, all my family and I, we hunted all through that period, and it was so good then. And when whitetails finally started figuring out how to counter that kind of hunting, that kind of distressed us, So that's when we started working on finding new and better ways to hunt older bucks. And so here we are at this point today, and as far as we're concerned, we've done it. We now know how to take older bucks as often, if not more so, than we did back in the mid-80s. And so this is going to really change the way you hunt in the future. Well, anyway, the book covers all those 6 methods in detail. And also, these hunting schools, I put on hunting schools for about 25 years. And guys from all over the country came to the schools. It was really fun. I enjoyed those things. It was a lot of work. And my schools, my schools were in early spring, usually about the last days of April or the first days of May every year. And it wasn't high season, but in most of the schools that I had, I took guys into usually no more than 20 a year, because I don't want a bigger crowd than that for that kind of school. But I'd take them to my hunting area, and we spent 2 days of the school out there in the field, and where I could show them actually everything that they needed to know to hunt older bucks and how to hunt them. And that was so much fun. And so that's a really nice set of videos to have. And here's where you're really going to learn, because so much of it is in the field, is what we call the sign method of hunting whitetail. Well, bucks, basically. So you probably never heard of that before. Some guys call it Dr. Nordberg Sherlock Holmes method of hunting whitetails. 17 hours of videos to watch. That's a lot of videos. But boy, will that make a difference in how well you do hunting bucks every year. So that's a good investment as well. So if you haven't got these yet, and if you can swing it, get these before hunting this year and learn how to use one or more of these hunting methods. Well, let's get busy here. I got lots to talk about. Yeah, Katie is my youngest daughter, and it took her longer than the rest of the family to get to the point where she finally got a really big one. And it happened one year. She was in college then, and she came to camp during the week. She had got some days off to come to camp to go deer hunting. And I was there alone. My sons were back in school and their jobs during the week. And it was just Katie and I there. And I was out hunting all day. The day she came in the afternoon, and she got to her big wall tent and got the fire going in the big wood stove there, and had it nice and warm. And then she decided, well, she'll even cook supper. She'll poke around in our ice chest to see what we had. And I came out of the woods in the dark that evening, and I was expecting her. And on the way there, I was traveling south along a deer trail. It was actually a really old logging trail, or parts of it, and then a deer trail from then on. I was walking along this deer trail here in the dark, flashlight, and I came upon some tracks in the snow. There was plenty of snow on the ground then, about 6 inches. Fresh tracks of 2 deer crossing that trail there and heading over in that direction. Now, one of the deer had tracks, almost 4 inches length, the hoof part, not the dew claw, just the hoof, almost 4 inches in length, and he was dragging his hoofs from track to track. And you know, you watch my videos enough, maybe you haven't, but if you watch my other videos, you'll realize that when you find tracks of a deer that dragged his hoofs from track to track, so you know, you see marks in the snow going from track to track. My boys call them railroad tracks. That is a buck who's under the influence of doe and hate pheromone. Well, it was with another deer, and those were smaller tracks, 3 inches long. And so right away I knew when I saw those, you know, I stopped and looked at them, that here was a doe and hate, and this big buck was with it. And likely, it usually is the case, a big dominant breeding buck, one of the biggest bucks in our area, and certainly the biggest buck in that square mile. And so, and they were heading over here. There's a beaver pond over on this side. They were heading uphill from there. There was kind of a slope going uphill there, heading over in that direction. And what they did, you know, they were heading toward this feeding area. Now that's always, it was made for decades. It was a really favorite area of whitetails after the first week in November. About the end of that week, our whitetails started eating browse. And one of their favorite browse plants are red bark dogwoods. In this area all around here, just red with them. There's a water here, a shallow pond of water right there, and big spruce bog, which is responsible for that pond of water there. This is all mixed timber all around it. So I knew two things. Here was a buck with a doe in heat, and they were feeding in that feeding area. Now, when we use a hunting method we call the gentle nudge, it's really important to know that where a buck is going to be. You know, and while breeding is in progress, quite frequently what we end up setting up a gentle nudge for is a buck with a doe in the morning or evening in a feeding area, in a certain feeding area, or a buck with a doe in its bedding area midday. You know, I would be there between 10 in the morning till 3, 4 in the afternoon. So we can set it up there as well. Now, if you never heard of the gentle nudge before, I'll explain how it works here in a minute. But on the way back to camp, I found those tracks. So when I got to the tent, and here was the lantern going in there, and boy, a nice smell of food coming out. I think it was venison stew that I had brought along, frozen. And so I got in there, and there was Kate, and all happy and excited about having a chance to go deer hunting. And the first thing I told her, I said, tomorrow morning you're going to get a big buck. And she said, oh, just like that. I said, yep, just like that. We're going to use a gentle nudge in the morning. And you know, that technique was fairly new to us. We've taken a couple of them, a couple of nice bucks using that technique before, and my son taking Ken, the youngest son Ken, getting the bucks in both cases. So I was getting to be pretty good at setting this thing up. Well, it was going to be a perfect situation for tomorrow morning hunt, because those deer would be there feeding in the morning. So, or at least I hope so. Well, anyway, I checked. We always had a weather radio in camp, and I checked the weather radio, and it said that we were going to have a light breeze tomorrow morning from the south. Now, that's perfect. So we had a good night's sleep, and then the next morning we got up from our camp and got all set, got to go. And I led Kate up this trail, and while we were going there was another set of tracks, fresh. And it just made it seem like crossing that trail, and the same two deer, same two deer heading over in that direction, to that feeding area. So, they're there right now. This is perfect. So, and the wind was from the south, light breeze. So we started back up, went right by this area, went all the way up here, and there was a trail up here that we used, deer trail, to get to a place where I was going to put Kate. Now, on the north side, this is north up this way, on the north side of this feeding area was a really well-used deer trail. Boy, lots of deer would come from out in this area and bedding areas back in there to use that trail to get that feeding area. And so what I had planned now, there was over here was a big hollow stump. I think lightning must have hit this great big tree a long time before that and set it on fire. And it ended up with in this lower 6 feet of it being hollowed out. And it was all black inside there, like it burned. But it was the back side of it, you know, the north and east side of it were narrow strips of wood. And inside, in the middle was an area big enough. So what I was going to do is put Katie's hunting stool or folding stool in that stump, and she was going to sit in that stump, and so she had a solid background behind her, so her silhouette wouldn't be noticeable as long as Katie sat very still when deer were around. A good spot to sit. They was only about 25 yards off this main trail that deer were using to go feed there. Now, that's going to work just perfect. And then the stump here was about 100 yards from this northern edge of that feeding area. And so that was perfect too. You don't want to be any closer. So I had her on that downwind side, the wind blowing in this direction. Got her in there, got her all set up with her gun, you know, and making sure she was warm, and had her head net on, you know, with the eye openings on it, and sitting in there with my 30-30 had a Lair Extra Model 94 Winchester. And so there she was, and she knew how to use that rifle very well. She'd used it several times. But anyway, so she was there, and then after I placed her there, and you know, we were there, well, I've set her in that area about an hour before first light. A long time. She's going to have to sit there in the dark for a long time, be an hour and a half before first light, actually, before sunrise. So she's going to be in there in the dark, and I told her to be real still and sit very still. Gave her a few tips, you know, and I told her to watch this way, that the deer will be coming this way on this trail toward her. So then I went back, went all the way around, got down to another deer trail here. We named that one the Bunyan Marble Trail, and went in that way, and it kind of goes over this way and then continues east from along there. Well, I wanted to get well past the southern end of that feeding area, or this side of the feeding area, because when I started back and being upwind of them, those deer would smell me almost immediately. Oh, there's a hunter. Now, I didn't want to be walking toward them. That would be kind of intimidating. Those deer, they might say, oh, we better get out of here, you know, especially if I'm 100 yards, only 100 yards away when I sit down. Well, so you want, when you're going in, that upwind guy should be coming at a 90-degree angle, you know, a crosswind. So that when they get that whiff of you, you're not walking toward them, you're walking this way. So then when they smell you, well, he's not coming this way, so we don't have to run away. We don't have to get out of here. And we'll just kind of keep an eye, well, keep our nose working on figuring out what he's doing. You know, if he's just going to keep going out and we won't see him anymore, that'd be fine. So, but they aren't afraid because I'm not moving toward them. So I went in there and to a point where I figured I was directly in the middle on the upwind side to sit down. I sat down there on my stool underneath a little spruce tree where my silhouette was well hidden. I wasn't expecting to see any deer there, but I was being the upwind hunter. And when I sat down there, those deer would say, well, just a minute now, he stopped. And they probably kept feeding, and they probably kept lifting their head and sniffing, you know, and looking my way. Why, he's not moving. Well, that's fine. We don't have to worry about him. We can keep feeding here, you know, we're safe. So that's what they did. And pretty soon it was getting light. But what I had done when I sat down there, and this is where the name Gentle Nudge comes from, I had, my scent would be spreading out, going downwind toward the deer, toward the feeding area. And now, whenever a human or a wolf tries to force a deer to go in one direction, especially downwind, force them downwind any direction, an older buck knows there's probably danger ahead. They've had enough experience with this, with wolves and humans. And no, they don't want to go that way. That's dangerous there, and I can't smell what's up there. I don't want to get into trouble. So, when you try to push a deer downwind, physically, if I decide, well, you know, as soon as it gets light, I'll walk down this way and push that buck and those other deer toward you, Kate. Well, if I had done that, I can guarantee you what would happen. What deer are being pushed downwind, older bucks especially, they don't want to go very far in that direction. As soon as they get a safe distance ahead of you, and it wouldn't take long because they smell you come from way back there if you're going there, they're going to veer right or left. In this case, probably right into that spruce buck. Really thick and water in there, a messy place. Great escape area, a refuge for deer. Because I've never, I've tried going in there a ways, and boy, that's not a fun place to be. But the deer use it for a refuge when they need to. So they would have gone in there. And chances are the buck would have kept going, maybe go way out east, or would finally swing into the wind and go somewhere else. So he could smell things ahead of him as he's going and stay out of danger. That's typical of a big buck. You know, I've trailed a lot of big bucks in my research, trying to find out how large an area do they know, you know. Normally they live in a square mile most of their life, except in winter when they go to wintering areas, or when they're being pursued, like, say, a wolf or a human. And I learned, boy, they know a huge area off range. And it didn't take many of those trailing things to find out how big they were, but when a deer is running away from a human, and it gets a safe distance away, say 100 yards away in thick forest cover, they'll stop. And they'll listen and sniff and watch their back trails to see if they're being pursued. And as soon as they realize something is pursuing them when they're going into the wind, and they're not smelling anything upwind, it's safe in that direction, they would usually start coursing downwind at that point. And the reason they do that is if by doing that, they can smell the pursuer behind them. And they can know via their noses, and probably their ears too, the pursuer making noise, just where they are and how fast they're coming and how well they're doing, and give them a chance to outmaneuver whatever's pursuing them and stay a safe distance away ahead of them. And man, a big buck can do that for miles. And my son David has learned that as well. But, and John, so there's a lot of things you can do, but in this case, they would have, it's doubtful that we could have ever gotten that buck that was with that doe that day if I had tried to push him. But by sitting there, I'm creating a fence line of scent spreading out here. And whereas they know they're safe as long as I stay here, when the time comes when they say, well, I'm full now, let's go back to our bedding areas, they won't go this way because they smell me there. They smell the scent. It's like a wall. And, oh, we can't go that way. But since I'm not pushing them, you know, physically, and they can decide for themselves what to do, you know, what we're going to do, but they will willingly go downwind. Almost invariably, they'll go downwind when the hunter is just sitting there upwind, not moving toward them. So they'll decide to go downwind. And that's in their own volition. If you try to force them to do it, it won't work, but if you just sit there, they'll go downwind. Every time toward your hunter sitting downwind waiting for him. And it worked perfectly. About 10, well, a little bit before 10 o'clock, Kate was sitting there, and along came a doe with a fawn and walked right by Kate. And then pretty soon along came a four-corned yearling buck, and she was tempted. Gee, walked right by her only 25 yards away while she's sitting. They never noticed her sitting in that stump. There was other stuff in front of her, hazels, some other small woody plants, and a few trees between her and the trail here, but while she sat still, they never noticed her. And they walked right by and said, well, she was thinking, well, I can't shoot that four-corned buck because Dad expects me to shoot a big a big buck. So it went by. And it wasn't long before she noticed something moving back there on the trail, you know, it's tree, the forest cover. She saw something moving and she looked and said, oh, it's got big antlers. So it was coming, and what it was doing about, as it got closer, it stopped and looked back like it was checking to see if I was coming, you know, because of my sense going in that direction. And then it started toward her again, and then she was starting to wonder, well, I wonder when it's going to be safe to get my gun up to aim at that thing. And it got up really close. It was only about 25 yards away, and stopped to look back again. And that was perfect time for her to get a rifle. When the deer turned to continue down the trail, bang, and shot, nice, good shot, through the chest shot. And the deer went running off. You know, they run off more often when you shoot them with a 30-30. When I shoot them with a 7mm Magnum, they generally drop right where they are. But because the terrific shock wave goes through the vital organs in the chest when that bullet hits them. But anyway, the deer ran off in this direction and went down. And when I heard the shot, I said, oh, it worked. And I went back all the way around here, and I went back up this way, and I got close to where this trail goes back to Case. Here was the tracks of the buck running across here. Little fine droplets, red droplets, every few feet along the trail. So, oh, vital shot, and I followed it down to the edge of the pond, and there it was laying right next to a beaver house, a nice big beaver house. And so I went back up and went up there, and I got up to where Katie stopped, and she was looking worried at me. She said, Dad, it was a big buck. She said, I thought I had shot it just perfectly. She said, but it ran away. I remember Katie saying, or my daughter Peggy saying that when she shot her first buck. But she said, but it ran away. And I said, no, it was a fine shot, and you got the buck. So I'll take you down and show it to you. Let's go down there. So we went back down there, and we went there. Then I had to go back to camp and get my big plastic toboggan, because it was going to be just a toolbox dragging that big thing. And you'll see the picture here. You'll see her by that buck down, right down there where it fell. The pictures are there. And you'll see a picture of where she sat there in the stump. There she'll be in the stump. You'll see that. But this was a perfect, gentle nudge. See that? Me sitting there, it was a gentle nudge. It wasn't an aggressive way to drive the deer. Just sitting there. I wasn't dangerous, and it almost guaranteed those deer would take that trail to leave to go past Cave Stump. It worked perfectly. And it's worked perfectly for us many times. Now, over here is another map. And this is an interesting variation of a gentle nudge. John and I have thought about this quite a few times, and it was kind of an interesting morning. This happened only last November. And real cold morning. And when all this was happening, John's son Jimmy, my grandson, and I were already back in our big tent, deer camp, right about there on this map. And we were sitting there and talking about how cold it was, and we had a nice fire crackling in the big 2-barrel wood stove, and nice and warm in there. All of a sudden, come on, what's going on? And then that was close, and there was nobody else up there. It was just us, so it had to be John. Just the three of us there on that particular day. It had to be John. And it wasn't long before he comes rushing into the tent. I got one up here, up past camp a little way. And so, well, that's crazy. He said, come and see. So we had to get our clothes on and rush out there and go see that. And he got it right, he went, we was sitting right there, and this buck walked out in a little opening right here, and he dropped it right there. And So, well, that's kind of amazing, right behind camp. Wow, how could that be? Well, after we got it all figured out, uh, John, that morning decided he was going to hunt over here in that area. And he had seen, while scouting, he'd seen a lot of tracks up in that area, deer tracks, and some that were big enough to be made by a decent buck. So he said, I'm going to go up there that morning. So he went back there. And it was probably about the same time Jim and I couldn't stand it anymore. It was so cold. I had to get back to camp, get warm. It was below 0 that morning. So he started back, and he was coming back along the trail that he went in on, and he came to an area with a lot of deer tracks. Well, he saw a lot of deer tracks fresh when he went in there, so he was kind of excited about this spot over there. But he was starting out, and he saw a lot of deer tracks in that area, and he was, and coming back, you know, that's when we do most of our midday scouting when we're hunting, finding new tracks of deer that we might hunt in the afternoon. We're looking for that for this afternoon and tomorrow morning. We'd like to know where there's some bucks, 1 or 2 bucks anyways, to hunt later today and the next morning. So he's kind of looking for that because, gee, there's all kinds of fresh tracks over there. And he was kind of looking at those tracks, and he saw some beds. And he went over there, and there was like about a 42-inch bed and some 2 smaller beds. I said, oh, gee, a bed of a doe and 2 fawns. And just a little ways from the bed was some doe urine. And it was spotted with blood. Then you know it's doe urine. and that, when it's spotted with blood, it's a doe that's in heat. And so this was kind of exciting because there were buck tracks in that area too. And he started thinking about that. Those deer are probably in that area, really close. The doe had left that bed and the fawn without running. They didn't bound away. You know, we didn't see that kind of traction. They just walked. So they were not alarmed when they left the bed. And so they were probably really near. And right now, the pheromone being emitted into the air from that doe's body, and maybe the pheromone being emitted by that doe's urine, that blood-spotted urine, was coursing through the air downwind. And that day there was a northwest wind, and you thought, oh, it's going down this direction. And down here, you know, a buck can smell that a mile away, that pheromone. As easily as my dog can smell the pheromone released by a female dog in heat a mile away. Now, he'll take off and end up in that dog's yard. Bucks can smell that pheromone too, that far away. And that vector of air, of pheromone, was spreading downwind toward an area that where a dominant breeding buck, a younger one. It was kind of unusual that year. We had some 3.5-year-olds that were dominant breeding bucks because our deer population was so low because of overabundant wolves in the area. So anyway, we knew, you know, you'd probably think, well, that buck that lives way over here probably might be smelling that and is coming toward the doe right now, right at this very moment. Or it might be right there, you know. So he decided I should get out of here because they're smelling me because I'm upwind of them. They're over here somewhere in this area. And they're upwind of me, or downwind of me, and they're smelling me. So he knew what if he was not walking toward them, or even standing around and moving, staying in the area. If he walked right straight out this way back to this trail, and they smelled him going, they wouldn't be worried about him. They'd stay there. You know, he knew that was going to happen. And then what he thought he should do is go, not run, but walk pretty rapidly, and he'd go about 400 yards downwind. And he had a trail, well, a deer trail, but but he had a trail that he used that went back in that direction from right behind camp here. So he got down there, and while Jimmy and I were sitting in the tent, he walked right in here. He didn't waste time telling us anything, and he walked right up here and sat down where he thought he would be on the edge of this downwind setback that's full of doe pheromone. And thinking that if the buck is coming this way, he could see it walking up in this direction from there. Or if the buck already with the doe, and they were in this area, they would be acting just like as if there was a hunter sitting above them, because they doubtless, it was absolutely guaranteed those deer in this area smelled him, because he was upwind, and they smelled him when he left the area. But even if he left the area, knowing smelling that hunter up there, they couldn't be sure if maybe there wasn't another one. They were worried about going in that direction, and that's normal. These are things to think about when you're hunting whitetails, especially bucks. Now, him being in that area, having sat there for several hours that morning, and then those deer knowing it, they would be really reluctant to go in that direction, because they couldn't be. There's no way they could be sure that it would be safe to do that. So again, like these deer, these deer here, if they were going to go anywhere that morning, they'd go downwind. They don't want to go there, they're going to go this way. And they wouldn't go left or right from here, because you just didn't know. Maybe they would be in sight of a hunter up there. So they were going to go downwind, and there was this trail, going down through there into this scent vector that's going down this way. So whichever way it happened, John sat down there, and within moments, a buck walked into a little opening about 25, 30 yards away, and stood there looking around, and John dropped him in his tracks right there. This was really a really good hunting strategy that he used that morning, and it was really a great thing to do, and we've been thinking about it ever since. Now, if the buck had come from this way and he got up in this area, and John walked up here and sat down next to this big boulder with his head net on and all set to hunt, that buck probably heard him heard footsteps there. A lot of snow on the ground, but he probably heard something. And maybe he was saying, and he's smelling this doe, and maybe he was saying, well, maybe that's the doe, and walked over there to see if it was there. Where on the other hand, those deer had already started in this direction before he was out of that area. And maybe they started that direction while he was still there, or while he was right here. So another reason for them to think, wow, we don't want to go that way. They had already started out, and they were going south. And John went by them, staying where he was staying. He was thinking, well, I got to stay 200 yards away. Well, they wouldn't smell him when he's out here in the road, but he wanted to get far enough ahead of them to get to this spot before any deer ended up in that area if they were coming down there. And he did that. He moved pretty fast, went right straight up there and sat down there by that trail, and there the buck came. He didn't see the doe then, but it could have been right there when he shot, and then it left the area very quickly. Or if the buck had been coming this way, the doe was still up here somewhere. But in either case, it worked. Well, one of the things that's interesting about that hunting method is a person could, I got another hunting method they call mile-a-day still hunting or mile-a-day stand hunting. You can use either term for it, but in that particular hunting method, you scout early and find a trail or a set of connecting deer trails. Say maybe 800 yards or more, 1,000 yards, that long an area. Now say you go in there early in the morning and you start at the downwind end of that trail and you sit down there. You get there in the dark early and now it's finally getting light and you sit there at a spot you've pre-selected for about an hour. And let's say you didn't see anything. So now, the reason you want to sit at least an hour, because if deer are in the vicinity and they hear you come walking through the woods, sometimes that's pretty easy. A lot of humans are pretty noisy walking through the woods, stepping on twigs that snap loudly underfoot, or breaking through branches that snap loudly. Some people are pretty noisy when walking through the woods. But anyway, if they heard something and they couldn't be sure what it was, they're going to be suspicious for a while. Maybe they're feeding, somewhere in that area, or bedded, or whatever. They're going to be keeping an eye on the area where they heard the sounds, for at least a half hour. That's pretty common. And during that time, they might step into dense cover and just stand there and for a while, maybe 15 minutes or more, just staring in that direction, their ears moving, trying to pick up sounds and sniffing the air, And if a half hour passes after that happens, after the hunter has got to the spot where he's going to sit, a half hour passes, without any more sounds being heard, nothing more, then they're going to say, well, whatever it it's probably gone, or it's bedded somewhere, and it's not dangerous. So then they'll start feeding again, like say in the morning, and so finally after a half hour's pass, they're going to become visible because they're moving. Well, because of that, we like to get to our stand sites a half hour before first light, or another way is saying an hour before sunrise. Now, our hunting is this way almost everywhere. You can start, it's legal to shoot at a deer a half hour before sunrise, almost everywhere. And so what we like to do is get the previous half hour out of the way before that legal shooting time begins. And so that's why we get there 30 minutes before first light or an hour before sunrise. And we do it so well that deer have a hard time trying to figure out what we are. So we got that little period there. Well, we like to, when that half hour is over and it's now legal to shoot a deer, that's just about when these deer that might have been made suspicious about sounds they heard will start moving around. And so that way we don't miss a minute of the best hour for buck hunting. We've about 80–85% of the bucks we've taken in all these years, 105 since 1990, were taken during that first hour of the day. We've taken other bucks all hours a day. Last year we had 2 that we got first thing in the morning, we got 1 in the evening, and another one midday. So it varies, but most of the bucks we take are in the morning. So we really concentrate on doing things just right during that first hour. But so that's why we get there a half hour early. Well, in this mile-a-day stand hunting technique, If we haven't seen anything for an hour, you know, at that first stand site, well then we'll move. And we're gonna go along this trail, well, we might have it marked with fluorescent tacks, or we just know it. You know, most of the trails we use, we just know it. We've got a lot of trails, deer trails we use when we're hunting, and we know them really well in different areas. But we'll move to a new stand site at least 100 yards ahead, that far. And we'll go straight there. We aren't going to hunt along the creek, because that kind of behavior alarms deer. We don't want them to think we're hunting them. And so we just go straight to the next one and sit down again. And then we wait an hour. If you went every half hour, you'd be wasting your time there, because it's probably going to be a half hour before any deer that are in the vicinity will start moving again, you see? So that way, we've always got at least a half hour. You know, we stop for an hour, but at least the second half is when we're going to see the deer. So we've always got that second half to be there for, you know. Now, guys that just keep moving, you know, they're easily discovered by deer, they're easily identified by their sight, sounds, and scents, all kinds of reasons. But when you're sitting, even if they find you, you're not dangerous. You're just sitting there. And in a tree or underground, you might have tree stands set up along the way. That could happen too. But you got to keep moving into the wind when you're doing this. But we were thinking, you know, it might work even better if deer are in the area. You know, you're sitting there that first hour here, and now maybe they know you're there, and that's why you're not seeing anything, or not. Then if you go around and come back and go to your next spot, make a half circle around, anything in between here is not going to be disturbed. It's going to improve your chances of seeing deer. And you're setting up a gentle nudge at each stop. And that could be a really dynamite, a huge improvement even on this mile-a-day stand hunting. Now, John just mentioned, if you were going to do this, make this half-moon circle every time, then probably, I mean, it would make sense that instead of going into the wind the whole way, you're going downwind the whole way. Let's say here you are, and you're all alone. And when you sit there, any deer will know you're there. That tells them they shouldn't go this way. You're just sitting there. And so maybe they've moved away from the area, but they're being cautious about that. Whatever happens out here, they don't want to go that way for a while, because there's a hunter over there. Well then, at the end of your hour, if you make a half-moon circle and come back to a spot 100 yards or maybe even 200 yards ahead and sit down there, those deer that were caught in the middle that you didn't see are not going to go this way. They're going to come downwind toward you, because they're going away from this hunter that they've been smelling up here. I don't know. You know, that's really intriguing. I would, you know, it's such a good idea that I'm going to try it this year. I'm going to try that. I can think of a dandy spot. I was thinking of Slippery Rock Trail.
The idea about this that I like the most is it doesn't matter where you're at. If you think you've compromised wherever you're sitting,
Yeah.
and you suspect deer are downwind of you,
Yeah, you know,
that's the whole point of this. You can get around them by moving away from them at first, then hooking around them.
You know, the beauty of stand hunting is, or the great advantage of stand hunting is, you know, sitting in one place for a while, is that deer that smell you from downwind aren't terribly afraid of you. I mean, they're not going to deliberately walk up to where you are, you know. because you're a hunter. But they're not, you're not dangerous to them because you're just sitting there. And so they're not going to leave the area, they're going to stay in the vicinity. And so when you make this half moon thing and you come back up and end up downwind of them, where are those deer going to go? They're going to go downwind. So when you make this move, if you make it quickly and as silently as possible so they don't know what's happening, that might be difficult, but and you get downwind of them, then you're really more likely to see deer coming at you from upwind. You know, you're going to face this way. So that's an intriguing technique. And like I say, I'm going to try it this year. So I like that. I really like that. And and John, when he saw all this here, and realized what was that deer were in this area here, including that buck, he wasted no time heading out, getting down this way and getting back to this spot here, because he's saying those deer might be on the way in that direction already, going downwind, and he wanted to get there before they got there. And so, and another thing, thinking about this possible one-man gentle nudge that he created, it might work, think about something to think about too, maybe if you're going out there in the morning and you think you might end up doing something like this if you're all alone, you might put an article of clothing you've been wearing for a while, like maybe underwear, like the upper part of underwear, and put it in a plastic bag and take it with you. And then when you make this move, hang that thing in a tree here, so that after you leave, there's still plenty of strong human odor coming from that area, convincing those downwind deer that you're there, even more so. They're not thinking it might be that, well, he's there, to get downwind, to take advantage of this situation, knowing you got a buck and maybe other deer in between here. So putting an article of clothing you've been wearing, with your scents on it, like your top part that you've worn for the last 4 days, hang that in a tree there, that'll convince those deer you're still there. They might hear you or see you going out of there. If you're not going to them, that might not worry them, but then they were wondering if there isn't somebody up there yet, Hanging that article of clothing in a situation like that would convince those deer you're there. How's that for an idea? I like that. So there you go. Well, you've seen another accounting of this unusual hunting method called the gentle nudge and why it works. And, two things. You have to know a buck's there, and then for some reason, at a bedding area of a doe or his own bedding area, or in a feeding area where he would discover his tracks that indicate that's where he was going. Those are good things to know. That's why scouting is so important, both before a hunting season and during the hunting season. You can't do it during the hunting season like most people scout, or like we scout before hunting season. Before hunting season, we don't care about wind direction or noise or anything. We just be thorough. We go everywhere, checking everything. We're not concerned about what the deer might think about all this and how they might react. But during the hunting season, it's really important to be able to scout without alarming deer. And our gray wolves in our hunting area taught us how to do that. It's a special way to scout during the hunting season. So that's something you need to learn. That's another long subject. Another reason why you need to have that book. That tells you all about that technique and how to do it. But anyway, but General Lodge, for us over the years, there are quite a few bucks on walls in our homes that were taken when using the General Lodge as a hunting method. It's been really good, and I'm looking forward to the next time we use it. And because, see, we just feel so excited about, wow, we're gonna get a big buck. And rarely does it fail. It failed for my son Ken that one year when the wind switched about 6:30 in the morning, and I ended up being the downwind hunter, and I got the big buck. And one of the biggest bucks I've ever taken that morning at that. So, but it's a dynamite way to hunt. Well, there you go, guys. That's about it for about what I wanted to show you. And so with that, be sure now, I wish you would do me a favor and hit that subscribe button at the bottom of the screen here. And that's important for me to be able to continue being a deer hunting seminar speaker in years to come. I have to be doing well at getting subscribers in order for me to continue putting on these seminars. And almost as important, if not as important, hit that thumbs up button if you liked what you learned today. And I can't imagine you didn't. I mean, that's so easy. Just punch that button. So thank you much. And we're getting close now. I'm going to start saying good luck to you guys this year. And thanks for watching. I'll see you again soon. Be sure to visit my website. Here's the link. Here you'll find links to my blog posts, my Twitter account, my YouTube account, my Amazon store with links to my ebooks, my son's eBay store, a money saver if you're ordering from Canada or other countries, my website bookstore, and much more.